Welcome to the channel where Reddit's creepiest, weirdest, and most chilling stories come to life. Tonight, we're diving deep into the threads of terror, where every upvote hides a secret. Grab your headphones and prepare yourself for the tales you won't forget. The basement. I was home alone for the week, as my family had gone on vacation while I had to stay and work. It was around 2 a.m., and I'd stayed up to watch a scary movie in the dark in my basement. I was intent on really scaring myself and seeing how far into terror I could really go, while still knowing I was safe in my own home. It was then that I heard pounding footsteps on the first floor. This was a common, annoying occurrence when my family was home. Every time they passed through the front hallway, past the basement door, I heard their footsteps. This time, fear immediately shot through me at the sound. My reflex was to turn the television off immediately. The basement door was up a flight of steps and around a corner, so whoever it was would not have seen any light. I heard the basement door handle click and turn as I sat in absolute darkness. I moved slowly so as to be absolutely silent, and crawled behind our large television. As I passed it inch by inch, I noted with panic that its black screen still dimly glowed. I heard footsteps coming down the carpeted but creaky stairs. I froze in my hiding place, listening. For many long minutes, I heard nothing. Had the intruder seen the television's afterglow, or had it faded in time? Was he standing in the pitch dark listening for me? I seemed to lie there in total silence for an interminably long time. My panic began to fade, and I began to think more clearly. Had I really heard an intruder? Could someone possibly be standing there in silence for so long without making any noise? The basement was so exceedingly quiet that the silence itself began to hurt my ears. Could the unknown person really avoid any noise from shuffling or breathing or anything else? If there was an intruder, he was still in the basement because the creaky stairs were incredibly loud, the door handle clicked, and he wouldn't know to mask his footsteps on the first floor so that they couldn't be heard down here. I began counting in my head, trying to pass the time, as drool fell from my mouth onto the carpet. I didn't dare risk the sound of swallowing. I reached 60 seconds once, twice, 30 times, 60 times. By now my fear had faded and I was more confused than anything. I estimated I'd been crouched in the absolute black for almost 2 hours and had still heard nothing. If there was an intruder, none of this made sense. Finally, I decided I'd have to make a move. If I did nothing, eventually the sun would come up and shine in through the small basement windows. And worse, I began to smell something horrible and cloying. Slowly, ever so slowly, I began inching my way towards the stairs by way of the walls. If someone was standing there in the dark, I should be able to go around them and then make a break up the stairs. Meanwhile, the horrible odor grew stronger. Had something died down here in the night? No living person would smell like that. Terrible images of some sort of corpse monster listening for me in the dark erupted in my thoughts, and I moved as fast as I could without making a sound. Just as I finally approached the stairs, there was an enormous clatter, as of something falling or collapsing on the floor. It was at that moment I leapt forward and crashed up the stairs, running out through the open basement door and my wide-open front door. Now certain that someone was in the house, I called the police from my cell phone and watched my house from afar. The police came, checked inside the house, and then grimly came back out to question me. They'd found a body in the house, my elderly neighbor, who seemed to have died of a heart attack. Their belief was that I must have left the front door unlocked, and he must have wandered in my house while dying, looking for help. At first, I felt horrible, thinking that I had sat there in the dark while the old man literally died a few feet away. Then it occurred to me, what the hell was that loud noise of things falling that last prompted me to bolt up the stairs and out of the house? I asked the police and they confirmed The back door of my house had been left open as well, near a single bare footprint in the mud. Somehow, for some reason I'll never know, there was someone else in that basement with us. Silent, waiting, and listening in the dark over the fresh corpse of an old man. I've been living in this house for about 1.5 years. Around the 3rd month, strange things started happening. At the time, I considered my house mildly haunted. Firstly, there's the poltergeist. I call it knocks. It's relatively harmless as long as you don't ask it questions. It has a habit of answering occasionally, and its answers aren't always pleasant. In the beginning, all knocks would do was, well, knock. Once I acknowledged it as an actual presence and not just the house settling, I realized it liked to express opinions. That's when I stopped listening to speakers in the house and switched to earphones. I feared tempting fate. What if knocks was something truly sinister, lurking unseen in the walls? Being cordial with it was as far as I was willing to go. Knocks has rules, though. If it doesn't want you in a room, it'll rap twice, our clearest form of communication. If I hear 2 knocks, I quietly leave and return later. I've never dared to challenge it and won't find out what happens if I do. It also started moving things. Plates, cups, even food. Cups left half-filled would be empty by morning, and bread sometimes bore bite marks, disturbingly human in appearance. Keeping the house clean became a necessity. In this way, knocks and I coexisted. Then there's the basement. I almost didn't buy the house because of it. One wall has a strange recessed space, about 2 feet deep, 4 feet across and chest high. Crisscrossing yellow scaffolding inside makes it impossible to use for storage. Feels wrong, like you're not supposed to be near it. I've never stored anything in the basement. Aside from the heating units and some old furniture left by previous owners, the basement stays empty and avoided. When I have to go down there, it's during daylight and I follow unspoken rules. No loud noises, no rushing, no lingering. When you're done, you turn off the lights and don't look back. Here's an important detail. I'm terrified of the dark. Moving into this house alone was an adjustment. Between my fear and knocks, I developed a routine. By sundown, I prepared my room with snacks, drinks, and everything else I'd need for the night. My bedroom became a sanctuary. Pajamas, computer games, and books. Knocks seemed to respect this boundary, rarely disturbing me upstairs. The house would descend into darkness, and I left it undisturbed. This worked well until my brother's family visited. My brother, his wife, and their 5-year-old daughter Ava stayed for the weekend. They took the guest bedroom, with Ava sleeping on a mattress. Ava was a shy, polite child who spent most of her time drawing or reading. One evening after dinner, Ava approached me. "Uncle, who's the little girl living here?" she asked innocently. Her words sent a chill through me. Trying to stay calm, I asked, "What little girl?" "The one standing by the door in the kitchen," Ava whispered. "She's scary." I swallowed hard and glanced toward the kitchen. The door to the basement was shut. I walked over and locked it with the key hanging nearby. "There, it's locked now. Nothing will come out of that door," I said reassuringly. Ava nodded and went to her mother. That night, we all went to bed early. I retreated to my room, but the house creaked more than usual, as though Knox was trying to warn me. I was woken by a sharp rap on my door. My brother stood there, pale and frantic. Ava was missing. We searched the house, turning on every light and calling her name. Cabinets, closets, under furniture, nothing. My brother checked the backyard, the only external door she could have accessed. Meanwhile, I noticed the basement key was missing. The basement door, which I'd locked, was now ajar. 2 sharp raps sounded overhead. 2 for no. Even knocks seemed to warn me against going down there. But Ava was down there, and I had no choice. Grabbing my phone for light, I descended the dark stairs, calling Ava's name. The cold in the basement was biting, my breath visible. Scanning the space, I found her. A small figure huddled inside the strange recessed area, farther back than seemed possible. "Ava," I whispered, reaching through the scaffolding to pull her out. She clung to me, sobbing. The air shifted from icy to stiflingly hot. Darkness seemed to press in, shadows stretching unnaturally. Heart pounding, I climbed the stairs, Ava in my arms, and burst into the light of the kitchen. My brother and his wife were relieved but horrified. As I handed Ava over, I noticed something in her hand, the basement key. "Why did you go down there, baby?" her mother asked. Ava sobbed harder, unable to answer. Later, she whispered to me, "The little girl said I had to, or she'd eat mommy and daddy." The scratches on my leg from that night were deep and ragged, like claw marks, though the doctor insisted they looked like they came from a hand. I didn't tell her the truth. After that night, my brother's family left, and I was left alone with the house. The hateful aura around the basement door lingered, but I locked it tight. Even knocks seemed shaken, its usual raps eerily absent. I'm not sure what lurks in my basement or what Ava encountered. All I know is that I don't look back. Chris's voice was barely above a whisper, his face pale as he stood in the doorway of my room. "Hey man, I don't know how to tell you this, but there's people in the basement." I sat up in bed, my grogginess fading as I tried to comprehend what he'd just said. "What?" I asked, rubbing my eyes. "What are you talking about?" "Be quiet," he said urgently. "There's people in the basement, like 6 of them. I swear to God." I stared at him. "You went down there? They told us not to." "Yeah, I know, but I got curious. And now we need to get the hell out of here." For context, my friends and I had rented an Airbnb in the mountains. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend, hiking by day, drinks by night. I had been exhausted from hiking earlier and decided to take a nap. Chris, however, had decided to explore. "Explain exactly what you saw," I said, now wide awake. He recounted his story. Despite the owner's explicit instructions to avoid the basement, Chris had unlocked the door, gone down, and found himself in near darkness. As his eyes adjusted, he saw what looked like 6 figures sitting around a table. At first, he thought they were mannequins, but then one turned its head to look directly at him. He ran upstairs without a second thought. I wanted to dismiss it as a hallucination or a prank, but the terror in his eyes made me think twice. "Let's call the owners," I said. "I tried," he replied, holding up his phone. No response. "I've texted them too." We grabbed our phones and wallets and headed outside, where Jay and Paul were grilling on the porch. Chris tried to explain what he'd seen, but they brushed it off as drunken paranoia. "I'm serious," Chris insisted. "We need to leave." "Dude, it sounds like you're tripping," Jay said, laughing. "Relax." Paul shrugged. "Fine, I'll check it out myself." "No," Chris shouted. "I'm not staying here." Before any of us could stop him, Chris sprinted towards the woods, disappearing into the trees. "What the hell?" Jay asked. "Let's just go check on Paul," I said. We headed back inside. The basement door was wide open. Before I could call out, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Paul emerged, looking pale and shaken. "This is freaky, man," he said. "You mean there's people down there?" Jay asked. "Not exactly," Paul replied. We followed him downstairs, and what we saw sent chills down my spine. There was a table with 3 chairs, each occupied by an eerily lifelike statue. 2 were dressed as soldiers, their uniforms old and tattered. The 3rd was a woman in a long, flowing dress. The detail was incredible, too realistic to be just art. "These are just statues, right?" Jay asked nervously. Paul nodded but hesitated. "I don't blame Chris for freaking out. They're unsettling." Jay chuckled, pulling out his phone. "How much do you think these are worth?" As he took pictures, I couldn't shake the unease. Chris had said one of them moved, and something about the basement didn't feel right. Jay froze, staring at the far corner of the room. "There's another one over there," he whispered. We turned to look. It was taller than the others, its head nearly brushing the ceiling. It wore a helmet like those from World War I and stood unnervingly still. First, I thought it was another statue, but then it blinked. We bolted up the stairs, slamming the door behind us and shoving a couch in front of it. Jay ran upstairs to grab his laptop while Paul and I headed to the truck. "What's taking him so long?" Paul muttered. "I'll check," I said, rushing back inside. Jay's room was shut. "Jay?" I called, but there was no answer. The door creaked open, just enough for me to see a pale face staring down from the ceiling. Its eyes were unnaturally large, too far apart, and its skin was almost translucent. I ran without looking back, jumping into the truck. "Just drive," I shouted. Paul didn't argue. We sped down the dirt road until we reached a rest stop. We tried calling the owners again, but their number was disconnected. The Airbnb listing had vanished entirely. Later, I searched the cabin's address online. I found a single result: a grainy black and white photo of a soldier holding a blood-stained hatchet, standing in front of the cabin. His eyes were too wide, his skin eerily pale. Below the photo were two dates: August 17th, 1915, and the day we arrived at the cabin. It's been a week since that night. Chris is still missing, and Jay hasn't been answering his phone. Paul and I agreed to let it go, but I can't shake the feeling that we're not safe. And sometimes, late at night, I feel like I'm being watched. That's it for today's dive into Reddit's dark side. Which story left you shivering? Drop a comment below and let us know. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more spine-chilling Reddit tales. Until next time, keep scrolling, if you dare.